We are here now on the Contact Exec podcast. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Oliver. I appreciate you being here with me today. I think your point is exactly right. We could have this conversation probably 6 months now, and it'll probably totally different. But for today, we're just going to find out a little bit more about you and kind of what you've been doing and kind of how you got into this crazy business. So, give me a little background so everybody knows like where you come from, what you've been up to, and how you got here.
Sure, absolutely. So first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Very, very happy to be here. To give you a little bit of background, I've been a tech entrepreneur for the last 15 years. And before this, I built four venture-backed startup. I sold two of them. Perhaps interestingly, I built them across the world. Some of the companies were in Brazil, some were in the US, another one was in Canada. The latest company I was working with was actually a fintech in Canada, which was a turnaround story where we were giving capital to e-commerce company to purchase inventory and marketing. So very different than what I'm doing today. But as a lot of entrepreneur, I like to build, and AI was an extremely exciting time. However, horizontal AI is not something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs should be going after, because you run the risk of like being killed by the next update of OpenAI or Anthropic. There are extremely successful businesses today where I think the long-term longevity of those are going to be challenging. For example, Lovable might be the fastest growing company in the world, and yet I could see it being under threat by the next update, or even the current updates of Anthropic and Cowork and so forth. So I was looking for the different fields where a verticalization of AI could be really interesting. And a little bit by happenstance, I met a group called Stackpoint, which is a venture studio that specializes in construction tech. And they introduced me to the world of construction. And perhaps most importantly, they introduced me to two concept partners who are big GCs in the world, who were working already with Stackpoint to talk about the challenges they had. And the one that became the most apparent was the challenge of rework, having to coordinate construction projects across a lot of different specialties, a lot of people who are coming together to do a project while working simultaneously on other projects that are not the same, and make sure that everything works perfectly well is an extremely challenging ordeal. And I saw an opportunity where AI can, not only really help this process, but on top of that, work off of proprietary data to be able to really offer a different solution. And with this came a number of realization that probably is obvious to everyone, but I had to learn, is that construction is going through an incredible moment right now. There has never been more demand for construction between a recent maintenance act that has gone releasing $1.2 trillion for maintenance in the US, between the demand for data centers. There's never been more demand, but there's currently a shortage of 500,000 workers. So construction company require to do more with the people they have. Furthermore, a lot of the population in the construction area, one in five is over 55. And so that creates a challenge, because when those people retire, well, what are you going to do? So the current stage is that not only are you in an inflection point, but on top of that, people are embracing technology like never before. I was warned by literally everyone, oh my God, you're going to go into construction, they resist technology, etc. That has not been my experience at all. Everybody was hey, we need help. And on top of that, quite frankly, on the commercial side, which is what I know best, people have incredible tech stacks and have been using technology for a very long time. And so I think this concept of like reticence to technology was probably unfunded, but right now it's like literally an embracing of it. So that's kind of like how I got into this realization, because when I realized that how what a moment construction was having, but on top of that, that's a problem that the concept partner we were working with was an optimization and an efficiency problem, like the turnaround situation that I had, where we needed to do more With less, I just felt enamored with the market and excited about the prospect.
I think you're right. You know, construction is going through a strange time. The whole world is going through a strange time right now and looking at we're really building for the technology that is supposed to, really enhance and help us build faster. It's a very, very strange, it's weird, right? Because we need to build these data centers, we need to build these power build outs, we need to do all these things, but we're short people and we need a bit of technology to try to help us along to kind of make this help us be more efficient. But it's almost like this circular process that keeps going on, and it's goes every week, you or it seems like every month, Claude comes out with another version or somebody comes and then it's a little bit better and a little bit better. But it's that whole implementation stage that I think becomes difficult for folks.
Absolutely. Well, actually, the implementation stage has the same challenge as working together with multiple people. And I think one of the big difference today that compared to even just a few years ago is that in the past, when you build a new company, you needed to get everybody to adopt the new protocol. And that's very challenging. The good news is that if you were successful, you were named Procore or Autodesk, and you become the default protocol across the market, and that's extremely valuable. But for every one of those companies, you end up to having hundreds who just died along the way because it's extremely complicated if you're a GC to tell the architect that for that one project you must work that way, and for that one project tell the subcontractor you must work that way, and when they work with a different interface, that subcontractor, that architect will not have the same protocol. And then suddenly he just basically invested a whole bunch of sunk cost learning something new that was pointless for the rest of his endeavor. What has changed now is with technology, they might not even realize that the protocol have changed. They might still do exactly what they're doing, but now the output actually matches the most efficient way the GC would want to receive it, or if the technology is on the subcontractor side, on the subcontractor getting the output that he wants. So that's a massive paradigm shift that's going on thanks to AI, where suddenly you can inject new technology without forcing everyone to do it. But within a company, you still have that challenge. So I think the thing that we've seen is like, well, Gemini, Cowork, ChatGPTs are all magical. Everybody kind of use it their own way. But how do you get a company to benefit in a compounding way throughout the entire process with those tools when everybody's kind of doing their own thing? Which is why it is extremely difficult for a company, and that's not just in the construction area, like in any company, who to be able to create compounding benefits for this to work. So you often have to think about what kind of data are you going to go absorb? How do you think about the architecture of the information? How do you think about the architecture of the technology? Who gets access? What is the output you want? And for a lot of people, we're like, well, we'll figure it out. No, you won't, because you'll have 4 teams and 4 teams will be doing something different. But even worse, everybody on that team will be doing something different. So to get a
It's
consistent output will be impossible.
it's Excel all over again, right? I mean, it's an Excel spreadsheet on steroids, right? You've got 14 different teams with 14 different spreadsheets. Everybody wants a little bit different output, so they all have a different output, but then they want to come to a consensus on anything. Then they have to go back to, well, where did you get that information? How did you get that information? And how is it validated? It's the exact same question that we have today with Excel. It's just now it's the question that we have with AI.
I want to push this metaphor a little bit further, because if you talk to a finance team and you tell them we're going to go and implement a new technology, they're like, well, we're just going to do it with Excel. And that one finance team creates the template that they like, that they work, and they built. But now what's happening is that everybody, like, it's like you had 10 finance teams, they all build in Excel, and none of them are the same. They all have the same purpose at the end of the day, but they all have like different fields, different layout, different everything. And then you try to reconcile everything at the end, and it's actually more work than you had if you just just didn't do anything. And so that's I think that's where the metaphor goes. Like now suddenly everybody is like this wizard. And but but the reality is everybody's super excited. Everybody is trying to do it because they can see the end goal is that if you build it right, the amount of efficiency you can get is absolutely phenomenal. We, at Plum OS, which is my company, we review documentation like we're running them in 15 minutes when the average time was 4 days. And if now on a single instance, that's pretty cool. But when you compound this across an entire company, then suddenly that's where the magic happens. And this is where really I think the market's going to go is yes, if you had nothing else to do, you could try to go and build those companies and try to make it work. But on top of that, you do not benefit the learnings from multiple customers because you would only be using your internal data. But but in reality, you're going to be a lot better served to have a driven product company who also produces SaaS service, which is also perhaps a little bit of a conversation. But like when people say SaaS is dead, it's like SaaS not dead. It's just different now.
Yeah, I agree. You know, we're gonna have to get to a point, like I said, I feel like we're in the same position we were maybe 15, 20 years ago when we're trying to wean people off of their spreadsheets. We're still trying to wean people off their spreadsheets. Now we're trying to say, okay, we've found a tool maybe that can connect all the dots together and it can do it quickly, right? But the construction industry, and this is why, when you said you moved into construction tech from the kind of the finance world of things, I was like, well, that's a bold move because the construction industry, they're not adverse to technology, but they are cautious and they're pessimistically cautious about it and utilizing it, right? So I think it's interesting how that pulls together and what they're going to do about that because again, it doesn't matter how fast you get something done. Really, what matters is how fast you can make a decision on what you have.
Absolutely. Let me make an argument for the person who doesn't want to be wind off of of Excel and SMS because I think that's true in construction, but it's true in a lot of different industry where they're like, if only they used my tool, things would be so much more efficient. Well, actually, I think that's wrong. Very often, people are actually using what is most convenient to them for very good reason. Whether it is because the amount of time it takes to learn a new tool is just not worth it, or because your tool actually only solve 80 of the problem and the last 20% they have to go back to Excel anyway. So actually the logical thing is just to stay in Excel to start with. And I think it is very easy to say that people are resisting technology when in
Mhm,
reality, it's because the product is not solving their core issue.
mhm.
And
I,
yeah,
yeah, you've got that's a huge point right there. One of the things it's like technology failures. There's a statistic that gets thrown around. 70% of implementations fail, or they just they get implemented, but they just kind of fall off. And it's to your exact point. It's because the person or the user that is out there, working the job, doing what it needs, if it's only getting, 50%, 70% of the job done, right? Man, what a waste. Man, it's like, oh, okay, but I still have to do this part or I still have to do that part either manually or on this other system and it's not combined together. And then the frustration mounts, right? And they're like,
of course.
right. And so again, I don't know that this iteration, as far as I don't care what we introduce. I don't care if you introduce a spreadsheet or you introduce some new brand new AI tool. It comes down to process. What is the workflow of that person? What is the process of that person? And does this technology go from point A to point B, get them to their destination within that product?
Absolutely. And so, it kind of reminds me some of the technology that was built before where people were like, okay, so you text for 90 like you text all day and just like you text with your work, you text with your family, etc. Suddenly they're like, no, no, we're going to have an internal tool where for 90% of the time you're going to go and use that tool to communicate so that we can have a system of record, etc. But for the last 10%, you still have to text me. And then you have the CEO of that very same company texting the employee because that's the easier way to get the answer. And I'm like, well, if that's the truth, you know what you can do? Just let them text. Like literally just do that. And now now, there was a lot of friction in the past, but that can change. And I think you're quite spot on. And this is one of the core tenet of what we do at Plumwest. There are three, and I'm happy to walk you through them. But one of them is you lean into people's behaviors. That their working is already optimized. They know their work. They are the specialist. People have been doing this for years. You do not come in and tell them how to do their job better. That is fucking stupid. Ah, sorry, again. That is
No worries.
not the
No
most
worries.
optimal way. And then just they know how to do their work. Lean into their process, lean into what they do and see if you can actually help them. And if you're going to help them, you need to help them for whatever is a problem, the discrete problem that you're trying to fix. You need to help them 100%. 99% is not enough. Because if you then have to force them into the previous way that they're working with, then you haven't really solved anything. So you don't have to go all wide. You don't have to do everything, but whatever you do, you have to do it extremely well. And you do not force people outside of what they are comfortable with. They've already are optimized. And so that has been basically pushed over and over and over into the head of my team. I think they can tell you, like, if, you know, how do we think about customer behavior? I think they'll all like jump in and like PTSD, like we lean in because like that has to be the way. Don't reinvent the wheel, make things better.
Yeah, there's a big argument, a big push on, I would say, that specific thing where we've got some broken processes in construction and across the board. Every company's different, has a little bit different process. Maybe it's broken in this area here, or that, right? The output of whatever that is usually basically the same. It's just, how do you get there? Is there something inside of that that's broken? I don't think there's anything wrong with addressing that with a person that's been doing that job. All right. They would probably be able to give you insights on how to fix it because they've been having to do kind of workarounds anyway. Right. So they've been doing workarounds all this time. So, yes, to your point, we need to listen to the client and exactly what they need. We need to listen to exactly what they're doing. They are the experts on what that output needs to be. Right. But on the flip side of that, that client has to be willing to follow some of the rules, because I think that's one of the constraints that we get ourselves into is we're taking very manual processes, very analog processes a lot of times, and trying to turn them into this digital magic. And digital magic requires rules. It requires boundaries. It has guardrails on it. And a lot of times I think that gets in people's way.
So I think it kind of goes back to the purpose of things. Like there are things that are very annoying that you still really want to do. So I'll give you an example. The a superintendent needs to write a report over what the hell happened with the subcontractors, and the subcontractor needs to do the same. Now, the thing is, 99% of the time, doesn't really matter because as long as things goes well, nobody's going to read those reports. But you need to store them, you need to file them, and you need to make sure that they're there because this 1% of the time, and it's probably not even 1%, it's probably 1% of the time that things go really wrong. Then everybody's going to be looking at like, well, what did the report say? What was their divergence and so forth. And so you're asking to do something that's extremely repetitive, but on top of that, you're asking to read something that is probably pointless every single day for that very unlikely event. It's a little bit about like preparing for, not getting hit by lightning. Like, how do you do? Like, just don't go out anymore because you could potentially ping. So that's very, very difficult. But if you understand the purpose of it and you understand what are humans really good at, and you understand where you can enhance the part that they really don't want to do, then I think suddenly you can have like very, very solid solution that can be embraced. If you were able to tell to the superintendent, for example, which by the way, what I'm going to pitch right now is not something we do. It's literally just a free idea. If there is a company out there that wants to do it. But if you could tell the superintendent that instead of having to write a report at the end of the day, when he's already had to solve like 50,000 issues that happened, he doesn't have to write a report. He just have to go and talk to an AI and say like, here's what I saw happen, etc. And the AI can ask clarifying question, and then a different AI goes and verify if there is any contradiction between and bubble up the difference between what the superintendent and the subcontractor has done. Like, wouldn't everybody be happier? Like, it'd be the equivalent of having like a cup of coffee and just talking to that AI to finish to finish your day, as opposed to think about, will this be readable? Will this be in the right format? Like, do I have to go and verify what they said? Is there any conflicting information? Like, this is one of the things where you can still get to the same outcome. You still have to do it. It's still going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass, but it's important. So you have to do it, and you can just make it better by leaning into what people would rather do.
Yeah, I always look at it as, and I've had, superintendents, foremen, folks that are on the job site, project managers, they tell me, it's like, hey, if you can just take it off of our plate so it's just automated, right? Then that's great for us. For the executive level or for the office team, kind of folks, they're going to be able to utilize that information. That a lot of times the biggest complaint I get from them is that these folks are using these tools, but they're just giving not the right information. They're giving so there's a it's a whole there's got to be a structure around the information that you give for feedback, right? I mean, if you just tell me, yeah, we had some deliveries today, and yeah, the guys showed up, you know what I mean, and one guy took vacation, and then blah blah blah, but there's no detail or there's no context to it. It's not going to give you what you want, and AI is definitely not going to be able to extrapolate that from any sort of conversation. So again, it's a dual role there. I think the dual role of the software would be is to say, okay, this is the position. This might be important at this stage of the work to ask this question to then engage that conversation. I think that's an interesting area that you could travel.
Absolutely. And on top of that, what's interesting is I've now gone to a lot of of daily stand-ups that teams have, right? And the amount of information that is shared there, it's shared freely. It's shared very naturally. So
Hmm.
it's not like people want to retain the information. I just think they don't want to have to write an essay at the end of the day. Like, so
Hmm.
if you start thinking about like, people don't mind to get it, they're hard workers. Like, they have so much to do. Like, if you can reduce the friction, and again, I think that everybody has been embracing the technology incredibly well. People are consummate professionals across the board. And even when I see complaints going like, this subcontractor didn't show up, or that person didn't, like, this guy did. Very often, if you go talk to the person who is being complained at, it's kind of like, well, they had 4 projects, and like one of them it rained, and the other one, like, this guy broke his foot, so that's like, now you have to juggle. And it's like, I've only been seeing like incredible professionals who are doing what the best they can at a time where there is, like, again, a ton of demand and not enough people, or not enough people across the board. So I really see the technology kind of like coming in to be able to enhance those people and be able to really help. I was literally just talking right before this call with my head of product. We're like, how cool is it that we get to work with AI to go and actually help people? Like, that's pretty awesome. Like, if you're part of the AI tech world, you hear about all the dystopian end of the world and, like, replacing jobs, etc. I'm like, that's not what I'm seeing. Like, what I'm seeing on my day to day is, can we make this more fun for everyone across the table? Like, what my current tool does, like, doesn't replace anyone. It just simply makes it so much better to work. So you don't have to like compare and stare at like 2,000 pages of specs. So yeah, as you can tell, it's just an exciting time, I think.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too. I think a lot of times we try to focus on things that are just like way out of our control. Like there are models out there that are being developed, yes, that probably could replace some very menial task jobs. And that is going to happen. I have no doubt about it. I do believe it is part of our responsibility across the board, just as human beings, is to be part of the conversation, at least, of what do we do with AI and how do we make sure that AI is not replacing jobs that don't need to be replaced, right? How, because and if you're look, it's if you're just sitting back going, "Well, someday it's gonna take my job, I'm never gonna engage with it," that's a problem, right? Because here's the thing, yeah, it's probably gonna replace you if you don't keep up, and I've heard this argument before, it's not AI is not coming to take your job, it's more like the person that understands how to use AI is probably gonna take your job, and I believe that that's true in the very near future. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
100%. I think and I would say most of the people I've talked to see it that way as well. So, whether it is from owners reps or a GC or subcontractors, like, okay, people who are going to get and figure it out are just going to outpace everybody else. So we need to figure it out, which is also another reason why I see that people are really embracing the technology. It's not always super clear where to start with, and that's definitely one of the items that we've been trying to help. We have a narrow scope on what we help with, but like whoever we work with, we'll tell you we'll help. Like you need to have AI policies. You need to think about what is the part that is interesting, not interesting. You need to think about data architecture. We're just going to be helpful, be good citizens, because I think people are embracing it, and it's like everybody's in this journey together. And will there be space to be old school? There will be space to be old school, but kind of depends on what kind of business you want to build. And if you want to build kind of like a more human, smaller scale kind of work. Like, for example, if you're a residential developer and you want to make like highly tailored houses or cookie cutter actually for that thing, but like you want to make it like much more about the individual and the relationships and so forth. That will still work. That will always have a place, because if anything, a lot of what the AI does is that it automates a lot of the processes and like gives you a lot more scale and like simplify things, but it actually gives you much more time to have a more human touch to what you're doing. So that part will always count there, and that's totally fine. Now, if you're trying to go and build a business that will grow very fast, it will kind of like capture as much of the demand as you can, and you need to be able to scale and like increase your profit margin, etc., which quite frankly doesn't have to be your end goal. But if it happens to be your end goal where you want to build something that's like really big, you're going to have to embrace it, because the output of a PM, even just using our tool, and we're pretty early, compared to one that doesn't use our tool, is literally, as I mentioned, 15 minutes compared to four days. Like it's such a drastic change of paradigm. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for and what you're trying to build. Not everybody want to be SUFA. Totally fine. It's totally fine. It's just a different type of company. And quite frankly, there are some people who comes into the office and just enjoy working and doing and like being with their coworkers, etc. There will be a space for that. I'm sure it will just, the companies who are gonna go ahead and like crush it are gonna embrace it.
I agree with you. I think that is it's a valid point. It's really about like personal objective with AI, right? It's a tool just like anything else, and you can either decide to use it, not decide to use it. Your market, whatever that may be, is determined by you. If you, again, like you said, if you want to scale to large sizes, most likely the pathway to scaling to large sizes in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, right, is going to be with the use of AI and robotics and all the fancy tools. It would be the same way if you compared somebody that wanted to be a custom car maker versus somebody that wanted to be a production car maker, right?
Yeah.
If you're a custom car maker, you're going to turn out 1 to 2 cars a year. It's very personal. It's very, it's time consuming, very detailed. Yes, on your part, but if you wanted to be, General Motors, Ford, you know, Chrysler, whatever, you're going to have to use the tools. You're going to have to use the robots. You're going to have to use the technology to be that size. And I absolutely agree with you on that. I do think AI is the pathway, and I'll even add on to that. I think AI is the pathway for what they would call a disruptor. People being able to move into the space that may not have had the ability before with that with the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my instinct on the short term is that you have multiple things that are happening at the same time. So it's tough to wrap your head around everything. But I'm going to start with the back office. I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing on in the on the actual construction site. But what very clearly AI is going to enable is that your back office team is going to be able to take on more projects. That's just that's clearly coming. And the mission of my company is to make every project finish on time and on budget as a rule. Like not as in like once in a while we don't have a problem. Like no, we think we're going to be able to catch every problem, make you finish on time, and like with a budget, and like basically preempt all issues. And we think that it's completely realistic. So that basically means that not only do you have less cost, but also without even considering the the saving that you'll get, you also have the efficiency of the PMs that just like grows exponentially. Exponentially might not be the exact term, but like grows immensely. And at that point, they'll be able to be working on more. So now you have a new problem, which is, well, the bottleneck suddenly might become how many projects can you have from a financial perspective? So that's, you have to raise money. You need to be able to get there. But given the current era we're in, I don't think that's going to be the bottleneck. The real bottleneck is like, can you find enough teams to go and actually build? And this is where all of the enhancement in robotics are coming in. And there is even mixture of robotics and AI that are coming towards. That's very, very interesting, but that probably will lag a little bit. As the reason it will lag a little bit because you can't build wrong. Like building needs to stand on needs to stand and be perfect. And so the amount of for the you need a few things for it to go right to be able to get there. And so this is where like at the very beginning of this conversation I talked about like we're talking about today, we're talking tomorrow, in 10 years. And so in 10 years, do I see a lot of automation in the construction? Yes, absolutely. But in order for this to really happen, you need to have a few things. You probably need to start with very small, repeatable processes that are like very safe. Like I think we've all seen this video of like the bricklayer that was like absolutely incredible. Well, that only
Right.
works in a very constrained environment. You cannot just have it gone on like the second floor and do this, which is again silly. Like any worker, any bricklayer can do it at any floor, but like that will only work in a very controlled environment. So okay, so first it needs to work really well. Then it has to be completely safe. But then you also need to also have the price where companies can actually afford this. So all of the money that we're currently being seen into robotics is incredible. It's really, really freaking cool. You can see SoftBank going in, etc. Like awesome. Probably a little bit later. So right now, I think the play is really on the pre-construction side and getting the back office really, really efficient and getting as much as you can from your current team. And soon after, looking at the construction site, looking at the part where you can start building side by side with robots and so forth.
Yeah, I think the successful ones of these types are going to be the ones that are willing to take the risk on that. I call it a parallel expense, right? Because to your point, like the bricklaying robot, right? There's a lot of special conditions that have to be met. There's a lot of expense involved. You still have to have the the official bricklayers there, and if somebody's got to load that machine, they got to, they still got to be there to watch it all go down, and then they still got to get that machine out of the building once it walls itself in somehow. Yeah, it's like there's a lot of thought that has to go into and a lot of expense that has to go into. And the first companies that are able to overcome that parallel expense to then make delivery, those are going to be the companies that kind of push that technology forward.
I actually somewhat disagree.
Okay, I like it.
So I actually think that the very first mover in the robotic field is probably going to break their teeth a little bit because first, most likely they're going to be already at massive scale, and for them it's going to be R&D and it's going to be sunk cost. But let me try to give a better like a better example. Well, I think today, if you were to come in and to use, let's say, ChatGPT, immediately it's going to be very cheap and it's going to be super useful and super powerful for your day to day. Now, I came into this when the only product from OpenAI was like DALL-E, and it was creating images that was there, and then I had to figure out how to prompt it to do it well, and it took literally hours of the day to get a
Hmm.
very subpar result. And
Yeah.
so I think the first mover will have a little bit of this, where it's like going to be a massively expensive, very marginal return, and but will open the way to go further and further. And at some point, you're going to have an inflection point, and that inflection point will be when the price and cost and the reliability of the robots are going to hit the inflection point. And I cannot tell you where that inflection point was. And if I could, I'd be a billionaire. But when you hit that inflection point, then it's going to be the first mover of the inflection point. The first few people are much more on the R&D field, if you will, at the, really at the forefront of the bleeding edge, and they might not get all of the benefit, but at some point you're going to be at a improvement cycle where everything starts clicking and things just go like wildfire. And it's a little bit, a phone manufacturer. I think that's a good example. It remembers what was a Wolf of Wall Street. Well, yeah, like I think you and I are probably in the age where we have seen Michael Douglas, Wolf of Wall Street, and he had like this like massive brick of a phone. And like that
Yeah.
phone was $30,000. You had to charge it for 24 hours and it
Yeah.
lasted half an hour of battery. And so there is a company who built that phone. I do not know who that company is, but it's definitely wasn't Nokia, and well, maybe it was Nokia, but I very doubtful that
It
guy
might have
is.
been like, I don't know that phone specifically, but like the Motorola's, the early Motorola's were,
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. But like you can tell that like those guys, they built it, it worked, it was awesome. By the way, I saw one in real life, and it had like this like antenna that like you could poke somebody like that was like miles
Mm.
away.
Yeah.
But those guys didn't really make it. The guy who made it are the guys where like this inflection point where like the utility of the phone became crazy. And like suddenly you had like everybody had like this brick Nokia, and that was that was already, and then there was a second inflection point with the iPhone. So that's where I think we were still in the brick phone part
We're
of
the phones.
robotics.
Yeah.
And so I think those guys, the first mover, are not going to be the winners, but they're going to push it forward to get to that inflection point. And so do I think the early adopters, the SoftBank of the world, is it going to do well? Maybe not, but they're going to spend a lot of money so that somebody else is going to get it right.
I don't, the SoftBank of the world. I mean, the house always wins on those kind of things. I kind of think, if you're investing a little bit, we're going to see a lot of players in and out of this whole game. That's for sure. There's going to be something new. It'll be surprising. If anything, the next 3 to 5 years are going to be very, very interesting to see how this all shakes out with the idea of compute and the idea of what we need to build and how many people we have to build it and are we going to get there. Those all those questions are yet to be answered, but
I,
it's going to be
I,
interesting.
I think one of the things that was probably in the favor of their early movers is that the inflection points are happening a lot faster because I was playing with DALL-E not that long ago, and now what things are capable of is completely different. So maybe the first mover will be able to reach the time of the inflection point. So TBD, but like what an
There
exciting
may be
time
a
to be
few.
alive.
Right. But again, there's a lot of people moving in the same direction. There may be a few that break through, you know what I mean, and get to next level. But to your point, there probably will be quite a few that fall off, in a horrid fashion. So
I'll add just one last thought. What an incredible time again that at a time where there is a shortage of like 500,000 people in the construction area, like suddenly AI and robotics can be told as it can be talked about as a solution that is actually viable and not something out of science fiction. While just 20 years ago, it would have been like literally in the movie in a movie. And just an amazing time to be alive.
Yeah, it is an amazing time, and it is. We've got quite a future ahead of us. So, like every day is a new day around here, and I know as well with you. 45 minutes runs pretty quick around here, but man, it was great talking to you, Oliver. And I hope we can do this again sometime soon. But thank you for being on today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the time. And yeah, looking forward to do this again.
Very good.